The very same politicians who have been warning us for years about the dangerous conservatives importing American style politics into Canada are now recruiting Canadians to volunteer in the American federal election. Christy Clark, Kathleen Wynne, and Rachel Notley have endorsed Canadians for Kamala, a new group seeking to recruit Canadians to act as volunteer canvassers in Philadelphia. Setting aside the stunning hypocrisy of these three women, the Harris campaign would do well to remember that all three of these former politicians left their premierships in disgrace. Albertans are still feeling the squeeze of electricity prices caused by Notley's bid to end coal-powered plants, with the threat of rolling brownouts now looming every winter. In Ontario, I was in high school during the last years of the Wynne government and still remember the host of businesses that went under due to skyrocketing hydro prices. Some posted signs saying, "You win," using the Premier's last name as a play on words. And in BC, like in Ontario, the Liberals still haven't recovered from the Clark and Wynne's failed governments. In both cases, the Liberal parties there have been non-starters for nearly a decade. In other words, maybe Americans should go ahead and welcome this support from failed lefties. After all, who am I to stand in the way of a little self-sabotage? I'm Rachel Parker, and this is Rachel in the Republic. Hey everyone, welcome back to Rachel and the Republic. We're going to take a look at a little bit of a Canadian angle for the show today. This story was just too funny to pass up. I saw it posted earlier this week that these three former premiers had endorsed the group Canadians for Kamala, and the National Post covered it pretty extensively. So we're going to take a look at what they reported because they have all the facts, all the evidence, and we're going to take a look at this hypocrisy from these former left-wing politicians. So in this specific case, according to the National Post, at least two of the former premiers have at least on one occasion denounced the perils of so-called American-style politics. And of course, now they are the new face of a movement seeking to recruit Canadians for Kamala Harris. The group has been endorsed by former BC Premier Christy Clark, former Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne, and former Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. Now, if you guys have been following my work for a while, you know that I now primarily live in Alberta. I do spend a number of months of the year in Ontario as well. But I actually grew up in Ontario under the Wynne government, and I can still remember, I grew up in the Niagara region in a small village called Jordan. If any of you are familiar with it, please let me know in the comment section below. That will just excite me because no one ever knows where I'm from. And I remember a lot of businesses going under because of the skyrocketing hydro prices under Kathleen Wynne. And I mean, she had a number of scandals. Some of you might remember those orange helicopters that were a massive failure, so much expenses and kept seeming to have accidents. I remember actually writing about that in high school. That was when I first started to get interested in politics because the way that Kathleen Wynne governed was impacting my life at already a young age. This is funny, but basically the convenience store down the street from me that sold candy in Ontario, we call them Avondales, it went out of business. It went under because of how expensive it was to continue operating the store. And that impacted a high schooler who liked being able to walk to the store to get treats with her friends on the weekend. And so I remember, and I would drive to my friend's house. We would go through Vineland, and I remember seeing a lot of businesses closing. And I specifically remember seeing some of them posting the sign saying, "You win." And that impacted me at the young high school age. I think I was in grade 11, grade 12 when this was going on. And I was actually writing about it in one of the classes that I was taking at the time. And that's what really piqued my own personal interest in politics. That's what led to my decision to go to Carleton University and study journalism with another double major in poli-sci, because I was like, I want to do political journalism. And here I am about a decade later myself. So I remember that very specifically. So I just had to tell you guys that story because it's just funny that it's come full circle. And of course, now you guys know I live in Alberta, and I also experience there the high cost of electricity prices. And it seems every year, I mean, last year was a particularly mild winter, and there was still the threat of potential rolling brownouts because of the devastating Rachel Notley policies. And we're still experiencing the high cost of electricity there. So it's sort of a double whammy. And I know that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has talked about the need to get more base load. So essentially, there would just be more electricity provided to the province because more people are moving there, and we just don't have enough energy to provide for everyone. So it certainly is a big problem in the province as well. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at what's going on with this story. Here's a Canadians for Kamala social media post. It reads, quote, "Here why we're coming together to rally behind Vice President Kamala Harris and how you can take action as a volunteer." So, okay, now the interesting bit of it, retired Canadian politicians are not typically known to pick sides in US presidential contests. And in this case, it's even more striking because two of the premiers are on record as denouncing the importation of US style politics into Canada. In a 2011 interview, Clark denounced the US money being used to fund anti-pipeline causes in Canada. At the time, she told the Black press, quote, "I don't think Canadians welcome American style politics. And so, whether it's American politicians or American interest groups, I don't think anyone wants to welcome that in British Columbia." In 2017, Wynne and her ministers publicly denounced her progressive conservative opponent, Patrick Brown, for bringing so-called US-style politics into Ontario. She said at the time, quote, "Let's just hope and pray that that's not the level of political debate that we're going to have here in Ontario or in Canada." So obviously just a bit of stunning hypocrisy. This was from the National Post. I did some research myself to see if I could find Rachel Notley talking about American style politics because it seems like something she would say. However, I couldn't find anything. If you guys have any examples, feel free to post them in the comment section below. But given that this was a Tristan Hopper article from the National Post, you know, he's a really good journalist, and I looked at self. I don't think we missed anything. That being said, if you know about something that we've missed, please send it to me somehow so I can get a look at it, because the hypocrisy of the first two is surprising in a way, but less so when you think about the way that liberals seem to turn themselves into a pretzel to justify a lot of their ideological beliefs. Like, for example, saying that women are treated unfairly, you know, women's bodily rights, while not thinking about the bodily rights of a baby, and then at the same time not even being able or willing to define what a woman is. So this is just another case, you know, here they have no problem supporting Kamala Harris because leftists hate Trump so much, and yet when they were premiers and they were governing, they often use that attack line of, oh, the conservatives are importing American style politics, to attack their conservative colleagues across the way. Now, I know what some of you guys are wondering, isn't this illegal? Wouldn't this constitute election interference? Actually, no, it wouldn't. United States is wary of foreign interference in its elections, but in this specific instance, it does not violate U.S. electoral law. And that's because while foreign donations remain a strict no as per Federal Electoral Commission guidelines, foreign nationals can provide uncompensated volunteer services to a U.S. presidential campaign. So if you guys were interested as well, you could go across the border and you could volunteer on the Trump campaign, go canvassing from door to door. I was aware that this was already a policy because when I was studying at Carleton University after the 2016 presidential election, I had a professor at the time who had actually spent the summer volunteering for Hillary Clinton. I feel like conservatives don't generally do this type of thing because they're busy working. Like, I don't know any conservatives who would just take like a few weeks off to go door knocking for a campaign that wasn't even in the country that they were. Like, most of the conservatives I know who do door knocking are like, they get paid for it in some capacity, like they're on staff for a campaign. So I just think it's funny. But, you know, if you guys have some free time, this could be a good way to get some exercise. That being said, I don't know how well you would be received at the doors from Americans. I think they'd be like, you talk funny. Every American thinks that Canadians talk funny, just FYI. Like, I feel like I barely have a Canadian accent growing up so close to the American border, just 20 minutes. And I noticed that the Canadian accent is so much more pronounced in rural parts of Ontario and especially in Alberta. So I just never feel like I have them. But my American friends, they always laugh at me. They're always saying I use funny words and say things funny. And I'm like, we talk the same. But apparently not. So they probably will pick up on the fact that you're not American. And I can't imagine that they would be too eager to see you at the doors promoting a given candidate in their election. But I could be wrong. Maybe they'll be glad that you're participating in their democratic process. I don't know why they would be. If an American showed up at my door and they told me to vote for Justin Trudeau in the next federal election, I would be like, get out of here. You should not be involved in this process. I wasn't the only person to think that. Of course, when this initial tweet, the Canadians for Kamala group, was posted, I had to take a look at the comments because you knew there was going to be some juicy stuff. And of course, it delivered. User Pat Soluski said, "Why are you getting involved in US politics? How would you feel if an American came knocking on your door to push a Canadian candidate?" So exactly what I just said. I think it would be a bit surprising for anyone, and especially because Americans are not like Canadians. Like, we always talk about how our countries are so similar. Culturally, they're actually quite different, and Americans are typically much more outspoken and forthright than Canadians are. I've noticed this in my extensive time traveling in the States, but also doing reporting in both countries. It's a lot easier to find Americans when I do things like streeters who are willing to come and do interviews than it is here in Canada. And I feel like Americans would be pretty quick to tell you off. I've had that experience on a couple of different occasions. Canadians sort of, we have that politeness. It can definitely be a fake politeness. They'll say no problem, and they'll start talking about you under their breath the minute you walk away, or cuss you under their breath after they walk away. But, just to be warned, if you're someone who's going to be joining this Canadians for Kamala campaign, if you're watching the show, probably not you. Just expect that some Americans might give you an earful. User Dro Og said, "Canada is a failed state." I thought this comment was funny because it just had a lot to do with what I was explaining in my earlier. These three women are pushing a candidate while having very poor track records on their own. So I don't know why anyone would be too keen to hear their advice. I always find the sort of like dark humor about Canada failing very comedic, and I enjoy it. I am trying to have less of like a black pill mentality because I don't think it's like a good way to go through life. And I think Canada is probably still salvageable. I think we can still save it. But I feel like among a lot of conservatives, especially in the online sphere where I spend a lot of time, that's increasingly like a less and less common and popular view. And I see a lot of comments under my show from you guys being like, "I'm not voting in the next election. Like, I don't like the conservatives, yada, yada." There's valid points to all those things. I will be voting in the next election. While I don't think that conservatives federally or at any provincial party are like the saviors of the world, I do think their policies are better. They're better for people. They're better for Canada. And I am hopeful that Pierre Poilievre will form government next, and he will actually do something about the immigration crisis that has changed the fabric of our nation, maybe permanently, quite possibly, especially because a lot of you guys out there are not having kids. So finally, user Jimmy Polkin said, "I'm expecting Harris will say no thanks, especially with Catherine. I got Doug Ford elected, win on the list." So exactly what I was saying before. I'm not sure why Kamala Harris would want their help considering the legacy that they've left behind. Okay, last week we talked a little bit about the assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump. And I wanted to just give a little update to you guys because there was sort of a shocking development in that case this week. And because we've been covering the Secret Service so much on the show, I felt that you guys would probably want to know about this update. So here it is. This is from the Daily Wire. The U.S. Justice Department released a letter on Monday written by the man accused of attempting to assassinate former President Donald Trump at his golf club in Florida, in which the suspect allegedly admitted to trying to kill Trump. This is what the letter says. Listen to this closely. The suspect's name is Ryan Ruth, and he said, quote, "This was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I failed you. I tried my best and gave it all the gumption I could muster. It is up to you now to finish the job, and I will offer $150,000 to whomever can complete the job." Why would this letter be released? Why would the Justice Department release this letter in which a man is essentially putting a bounty on Trump's head? I think all of us need to be asking why the government, why the Justice Department seems so intent on ruining their credibility at absolutely every turn. First of all, we have the initial assassination of Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, in which we still don't have a lot of answers. There's so many questions. Melania Trump actually released a video saying that there's still so many questions that she has, and she was roasted. She was lambasted. People were very ruthless towards her on the internet. Here is a loving wife who's concerned about her husband's safety and wants answers, and people felt that it was appropriate to mock her for that, even though some things should really be above partisanship. It increasingly seems that is the case less and less so. So in this instance, they've essentially released this bounty on Trump's head. And it's even more shocking given that a lot of times when we have like a school shooting, especially in some of the recent cases, there's been transgender school shootings, the government agencies responsible for releasing this information will not reveal the manifestos of the killers. They will not release the ideology behind the thinking that led to these murderers kill young children at schools, but they will release essentially a bounty on Trump's head. So I'm going to leave that for you guys to mull over. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below. Finally, I just wanted to wrap up today's show with a quick little comment on Matt Walsh's Am I Racist? I watched it in theaters. You guys should check it out. I saw it in Cineplex. It actually is playing in a bunch of Canadian theaters. Initially, I thought it was only going to be in American theaters. I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to go. But I was able to see it in Niagara Falls, just about 20 minutes away from me. So I went to see it. It was very, very funny. It was sort of like watching an extended version of The Office season 1. I'm sure you guys remember, like, I'm sure most of you have seen The Office. You're watching it and you're like, this is so funny. But at the same time, I'm so uncomfortable. And that temptation to like look away and to laugh and cringe at the same time. That was sort of what it was like, because there were so many moments in there. Like, Matt Walsh is extremely talented that he was able to do this film and to go into the rooms that he was in and to keep up the charade for such a long time. I don't know that I would have been able to. I don't think most people would have been able to. And just sort of his dry sense of humor and his wit, like he always knows what to say and how to respond in a given moment, that just has him coming out looking like an actual comedian. I think he should do stand-up comedy. There's not very much good stand-up comedy left. I feel like he could potentially be very good at it. Well, I guess that's sort of what his show is. My husband and I regularly watch his show and like laugh out loud. And that's what this movie was. It was sort of like a laugh out loud film. So definitely go check it out in theaters if you can, because I think you will enjoy it. And it's pretty rare that nowadays there's a movie in theaters that we as conservatives can actually enjoy without having some like hidden left-wing ideological message being pushed at us all the time that's not full of curse words and that actually tends to promote our values and that's family friendly. The other really funny thing about it is that Niagara Falls is like a hotbed for immigration right now, as I'm sure some of you guys know. And when I walked into the theaters, it had been a long time since I'd been to that specific theaters in the Falls. Me and my friend that I went with, we were the only white people. And I was like, wow, things have really changed here. Like, it didn't look like this back when I lived in the Niagara region about 3 years ago. I kid you not, like 3 minutes before the movie started, a whole bunch of white people showed up. And I was like, every single person that just showed up is going to be watching Am I Racist with Matt Walsh. Like, these people are here to watch this movie. And I was right. Our theater was exclusively white people, despite the fact that there was otherwise no white people at the theaters. So that just kind of cracked me up. Not sure what's going on in Niagara Falls. Maybe it's time to do some investigative work about the immigration crisis unfolding and how it's impacting Niagara Falls specifically. Maybe I should send my colleague Harrison to go do that, because he is probably the person in Canada who's doing the best job covering the immigration crisis. I know you guys comment about his work a lot in my videos, and you all agree. Okay, everyone, that's all we have time for today on Rachel and the Republic. I will be back next week, Wednesday, with more election coverage for you all. I hope that you guys have a great week, and God bless.